The sun had barely begun to dip below the horizon when the first sound pierced the quiet of the countryside. A sharp crack echoed through the barn, the stark contrast of wood against metal pulling the farmer from his evening routine. Silas leaned against the weathered boards of his porch, a sense of unease creeping into his gut. He had always trusted the tranquility of his land, the rustling of leaves and the soft hum of crickets, but tonight was different. He pushed off the porch and stepped into the shadows, moving toward the dim outline of the barn. Each step was deliberate, each breath shallow, the air thick with tension. Silas had heard whispers in town lately, rumors of troublemakers, drifters, and thieves. He had always dismissed them, believing in the goodness of people. But as he approached the barn doors, the chill that brushed against his skin felt like a warning. Silas paused. The barn door sagged slightly, its wood creaking ominously in the evening breeze. He peered through a crack between the slats and saw them, two figures, cloaked in darkness, rummaging through his livelihood. Panic surged through him, but he quickly caught the trembling of his hand and steadied himself. He had to think. Silas was a man of the land, a man of action. He wasn't about to let these intruders tear apart the sanctity of his home. He remembered seeing the half-empty barrels of apples stored in the corner. The trees had yielded a bountiful harvest this year, but he couldn't let all that hard work go to waste. He needed a plan, a way to confront these intruders without escalating to violence. He turned slowly, ducking under the old wood beams, and made his way to the toolbox inside the barn. He grabbed a pair of old rusted chains and an assortment of tools. They might not be flashy, but they'd do the job. Silas' heart raced as he moved silently, the adrenaline sharp and vibrant in his veins. He had spent years forging metal in the same way he had forged his life, strong, durable, but without unnecessary frills. Time had taught him many lessons, and tonight he would use those lessons to protect what was his. With a deep breath, he made his way back toward the intruders, allowing the adrenaline to guide him. All around him, the night grew darker, but Silas felt more alive than ever before. He peeked through the gap once more. They were still focused on their mission, careless in their movements. A spark of confidence ignited within him. In one fluid motion, Silas swung open the barn door, the heavy wood groaning loudly on its hinges. The intruders turned, shock ripping across their faces like lightning on a stormy night. Silas seized the moment. Confidence poured out of him like water from a spring. He boomed, his voice deep and commanding. For a heartbeat there was silence, a stillness as palpable as the encroaching night. Then chaos erupted. One of them, a tall figure with nervous eyes, swung a crowbar, aiming for Silas. But the farmer had anticipated this. With a swift move, he ducked aside, using the chains to trap the heavy tool in a quick snap. The intruder struggled against the unexpected grip, even as Silas summoned the memory of the nights he spent repairing the barn after storms, resilient, steadfast. The other intruder, trying to sneak behind him, found himself tangled in a rusty web of tools. Silas had always understood how to outsmart problems, whether it was unpredictable weather or stubborn crops. When he faced a challenge, he thought strategically. Silas commanded, and the weight behind his voice held more power than the two intruders had anticipated. The tall one hesitated again, scanning the thick wooden walls for a way out. Fear painted their faces, and it became clear they weren't prepared for someone willing to fight back. Silas took a step forward. Suddenly, the air shifted as the tension intertwined with desperation. The tall intruder dropped the crowbar, letting it clatter to the ground. We didn't know," he stammered. "Quick." Silas's tone remained steady, but inside his mind raced. This was no simple burglary. This was a peek into lives shadowed by hardship, perhaps similar to his own in moments of struggle. Is it so easy to take from someone else? The second intruder, a woman with wild hair and wide eyes, bit her lip, shifting restlessly. We just needed food. We're hungry." Real words, words that carried weight. Silas felt the edges of his heart soften, the drive of his confidence momentarily clouded by compassion. He could see the shadows of despair written plainly on their faces under the light of a single bulb swinging above. The world had beaten them down. He could relate. He asked softly, though the fire still simmered in his belly, "Every dawn I'm up before the sun, tending to the crops, caring for the animals. The woman stepped forward, her voice a trembling whisper. "We didn't want to hurt anyone. Just wanted." "Then stop," Silas interrupted, but his tone had softened, suspicion giving way to understanding. "If you're hungry, there's a better way. You could ask for help, but stealing." The tall intruder dropped back, his defiance wavering. Silas could see the gears turning in their minds. It wasn't about just getting food anymore. It was about survival, but desperation could lead to destructive choices. That was a lesson he knew all too well. "Listen," Silas continued, more urgently now. "There are ways we can work together. I need help around here. Plenty of hands make lighter work. If you're willing to pick some apples, I'll feed you. You don't have to take." He watched as their defenses faltered, confusion settling in like the dust on an old barn floor. Perhaps they had never encountered kindness when faced with their own darkness. He could feel the shift, the tension in the air slowly dissolving like mist under the warmth of the sun. After a moment, the woman stepped closer again, the tension in her shoulders easing ever so slightly. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely," Silas said, his heart swelling with unexpected hope. "But first, leave those barrels alone. If you want to eat tonight, I have a bowl of stew on the stove back at the house." A look passed between the two intruders, uncertainty mixed with a flickering of hope. They exchanged glances, aware of the chance standing before them, the opportunity to turn their lives around, however small. Silas couldn't help but feel a new sense of purpose driving him. He thought of the years he had poured into his crops, all the sweat and toil. Perhaps this was a chance to teach them something, to reveal humanity's default goodness in a world often darkened by despair. The trio walked cautiously back toward the farmhouse, the air thick with unspoken words. As they stepped into the kitchen, the warm aroma of stew enveloped them like a blanket. Silas ladled generous portions into bowls, the steam rising like spirits released from their pasts. The tension remained, but now it was laced with something different possibility. With each bite, their initial fears melted away, replaced by a bond forged in unexpected circumstances. They shared stories of struggle, laughter, and the unlikely twist of fate that had brought them together. Silas learned about their pasts. The tall one had lost his job, the woman had been orphaned at a young age. Their lives had been marked by loss just as his had. He told them about his farm, his dreams of expansion, and how, for every storm that rolled in, he always found a way to weather it. "You see," he explained, "life is full of challenges, but the darkness never lasts forever." As night fell outside, the kitchen became a sanctuary where three lives intertwined. Intruders turned into allies, and the weight of desperation began to lift. Silas recognized that sometimes danger can usher in a new dawn, a chance to create relationships where none existed. He had faced fear and transformed it into the strength of empathy, reminding them, and himself, that the true essence of humanity thrived where kindness flourished. When the last bites of stew were consumed, and the laughter faded into shared silence, Silas felt a warmth spread through his chest. Maybe the old stories of midnight shadows would gather dust, replaced by tales of unexpected friendship. And as he walked them to the door, newfound comrades ready to begin anew, he couldn't help but smile. The heavy chains now lay forgotten against the wall, gifts of fear exchanged for the riches of humanity. Evening light faded slowly over the old barn, casting long shadows across the farmhouse lane that led to Silas Wright's property. The chirping of crickets filled the air, and the sky turned from deep blue to a blanket of stars. But right now, Silas wasn't counting his blessings or admiring the sunset. No, tonight he was on high alert. Just moments ago, he had heard the unmistakable sound of hooting voices carried by the wind, a clamor that didn't belong to the familiar tones of birds settling down for the night. Silas's heart raced as he peered through the dusty window of his kitchen. All that could be seen was the familiar outline of his barn, with its weathered wood and rusting metal roof. But it was what he heard, not what he saw, that sent a shiver down his spine. He turned, his heart thudding against his ribs. Somebody was out there. What started as a typical evening feeding the animals and winding down after a long day had become a moment ripe with tension. Silas knew that remaining calm was essential. He was a farmer, after all, and he had faced storms far worse than this. But something about the intruders made his skin prickle, and instinct told him to act. Silas moved quietly to the barn door, his heavy boots barely making a sound on the wooden floor. Each creak of the floor echoed the warning bells ringing in his mind. Peering through a crack in the barn's weather-beaten wood, he could make out two shadowy figures. They wore dark hoodies, faces obscured, wrestling with something inside one of his storage bins. He clenched his jaw. The thought of someone stealing from him made the blood rush to his head. That barn held months of hard work, long hours under the sun, and sacrifices he had made for his crops. It was not just a building, it was his life's labor. Silas stepped back from the door, mind racing. What should he do? Call the police? Confront them? The setting sun painted the barn in eerie shades of gray, welcoming fear around him. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think. He scanned the barn, eyes landing on a pair of sturdy chains hung from a rusty nail. A flash of an idea struck him. If he could catch them by surprise, perhaps he could scare them off without violence. Silas wasn't one to back down from a challenge. With silent quickness, he grabbed the chains and slipped back outside, heart pounding in time with the steps he took. As he approached the large barn door, he could hear the laughter and muffled voices of the intruders' foolhardy confidence mixed with recklessness. They felt safe, but Silas had a plan that would change all that. In one swift motion, Silas kicked open the barn door, swinging it wide against the frame. The creaking of old hinges screamed through the night as the intruders froze, their heads swinging toward the sudden light spilling in. Silas stood there, a silhouette against the dim glow, chains tightly in his hands. He boomed, voice steady and commanding while his heart raced. To his surprise, the surprise was palpable. For that split second, he saw fear flicker in their eyes, and the world stood still. Their hesitation quickly transformed into action, a desperate scramble to regain control. One of the intruders lunged for a crowbar discarded on the ground, eyes wild with panic. Silas reacted instinctively, swinging the chain and catching the intruder's arm in a precise loop that sent the crowbar clattering to the wooden floor. Silas warned, heart racing like a freight train, grounded by the weight of the moment. In truth, he wasn't entirely sure if this was the right move, but the adrenaline surging through him pushed aside any fear. The second intruder, a woman with wild hair, darted toward one of the nearby stalls, eyeing a way out. Silas took a step to cut her off, all while keeping his eyes on the other who still struggled against the chains. He felt like a storm, fierce, chaotic, yet unpredictable. He commanded, voice steady but laced with authority. Their eyes reflected both defiance and fear, a cocktail Silas recognized well. Desperation could lead people to act without thinking. A sudden rush of empathy coursed through him, and he realized that confronting them with anger might push them further into the night or worse, into violence. He could see their fear morphing into confusion. "We didn't mean to cause trouble," the woman stammered, hands up as if to shield herself from the wind of his words. "We thought." Silas paused. He had seen the toll that hard times could take on a person. He remembered a time in his own life when he felt backed into a corner, desperate for a way out. Raised on values of hard work and resilience, he had learned that kindness could cut through darkness like a beacon. He repeated, catching his breath, "Is that what this is about?" The intruders stood quietly, caught between remorse and uncertainty. Silas felt their desperation harden around them, a shell built from countless unmade decisions. He stepped back, the chains dropping back to his side. Confusion flickered across their faces. There was a long pause, broken only by the gentle rustle of hay settling in the corner. The woman echoed as if tasting the word for the first time. "Yeah," Silas said, voice calming, feeling the initial tension dissipate. "My orchard has been overflowing with apples this year. I could use some help picking." The tall intruder blinked, and for a heartbeat, hope sparked in his eyes. "Deal goes both ways," Silas replied firmly, but with a warmth that broke through their defenses. "Muscle for food?" the woman asked, the fight still lingering in her tone. Silas smiled, that confident, weather-worn grin of a man who had seen it all. "You'll have to trust me. I'll show you my fields." After a moment of hesitation, the woman glanced at her partner. The weight of Silas's offer settled between them, a chance at redemption where moments before chaos had reigned. Silas could almost see the gears turning in their minds, the hope pushing back against the fear. "Okay," the tall intruder finally said, his voice a tremor of uncertainty melded with something else, determination. With cautious steps, they followed Silas out of the barn, unsure, yet willing to explore this unexpected turn of events. They entered the orchard beyond the barn, a sprawling expanse filled with trees heavy with ripe fruit. Silas demonstrated how to pick the apples, labor replacing lies. Each swing of the basket replaced theft with honesty. As night fell around them, they shared stories, feelings, and challenges. Silas learned that the woman had lost her job at a cafe, and her friend had lost his way after a battle with personal demons. They were not criminals, they were simply lost. Laughter mingled with the rustle of leaves and the hum of the night. Silas felt a sense of connection growing with every shared smile and tale of hardship. The decision to steal had become an unlikely avenue of friendship. Hours passed, and as they filled their baskets with apples, something beautiful unfolded, a moment of transformation. Together, they danced through hardships, the conflict of the earlier night now nothing but a distant memory. "Sometimes it takes a storm to see clearly," Silas said, a soft grin on his face. As Silas cupped his hands around a particularly bright apple and handed it to the woman, he realized that sometimes life's interruptions carry the seed of something greater. It reminds us that we are our choices, both good and bad, and that kindness could forge a stronger bond than fear ever could. By the time the moon climbed higher into the velvet sky, Silas had transformed two intruders into allies, crafting a new narrative from an unfortunate twist of fate. Apples filled their sacks, laughter echoed among the trees, and Silas felt like a shepherd guiding lost souls back to the light. As they walked toward the farmhouse together, the weight of the chains that had once gripped the night faded like shadows under sunlight. Silas smiled, knowing that it wasn't just another day's work. It was the beginning of a new chapter, written not just with hardship but also with understanding and hope. And that was how true strength is knit together by connection, courage, and a little kindness in the face of fear. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a fiery orange glow over Silas Wright's farm. It was a picturesque evening in the countryside, with the kind of calm that stretched for miles, almost too peaceful to be real. But Silas felt a prickle at the back of his neck, an eerie sense that something wasn't right. After a long day of harvesting, he had settled into his evening routine when he heard the unmistakable sound, the creak of the barn door swinging in the wind. He frowned. The barn had always stood as a sanctuary for him, filled with tools, hay, and memories of labor. But that familiar creak now sent a shudder through him. Silas rose from his seat at the kitchen table, his heart racing. He made his way to the window, peering out to see the dark silhouette of the barn against the sunset. As he looked closer, a shadow moved inside. His heart sank. Someone was there. Silas grabbed his flashlight and slipped into his boots. He moved quietly through the dimming light, the gravel crunching underfoot. He had heard whispers of mischief sweeping through the nearby town, rumors of intruders and thieves targeting farms. A chill ran down his spine as he considered the implications. He couldn't let anyone rob him of what he had worked so hard to build. Stepping closer to the barn, he noticed the door slightly ajar, swinging with the night breeze. Silas took a deep breath, steadying himself. Fear was not new to him, it was a part of life on the farm, but panic wouldn't help anyone now. It was time to gather his wits. He moved cautiously, stalking around to the side of the barn so he could peek through a crack. His heart thudded in his chest as he caught sight of two figures inside, rifling through his tools. They wore dark clothing and appeared anxious but focused, their movements quick and darting like rabbits in the wild. Silas's mind raced. What should he do? Call the police? Confront them? But as he watched, something clicked in his mind. He could handle this. Years of farming had taught him to think on his feet and adapt to whatever life threw at him. He needed a plan, a smart plan. He turned and made his way back to the farmhouse, heart pounding in rhythm with his own determined thoughts. He headed to his trusty toolbox, rummaging through it until he found what he needed: a length of sturdy rope and a handful of old, rusted tools. Silas's hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline pooling in his veins. He had always prided himself on being resourceful. A farmer's life was one continuous puzzle, and he was good at solving them. Now, as the sun melted into the horizon, he would need every ounce of that resourcefulness to confront these intruders. Silas approached the barn once more. He took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill his lungs. He could still hear the muffled voices, the clinking of metal on metal. He positioned himself by the open door, preparing to strike with courage. Just as he was about to move, the intruders stepped into view, faces illuminated by the faint light of a lantern they had brought along. "Let's hurry up," one of them said, a wiry guy with a scruffy beard. "Yeah, just a few more minutes," the other replied, her eyes darting nervously around the barn. In that moment, Silas saw their fear. Perhaps they weren't as confident as they seemed. They were desperate. He took a step forward, the floorboards creaking beneath him just loud enough to catch their attention. They turned, startled. Silas stepped into the light, fully revealing himself. He demanded, keeping his voice steady, though it echoed with authority. The intruders froze, eyes wide, their surprise clearly evident. The wiry man quickly dropped a wrench he had been holding, and it hit the floor with a dull thud. The man stammered, hands raised defensively. Silas shot back, stepping closer. He felt a wave of indignation wash over him. The woman's expression shifted as she took a hesitant step back. "We just needed some things." Panic swept through Silas, mingling with a flicker of something else, sympathy. He saw the desperation etched into their faces, the kind of urgency that made folks do unspeakable things. He remembered his younger days when just scraping by felt like an insurmountable challenge, when he felt the world closing in on him. Still, he couldn't just let this go. "What do you intend to do with my tools?" The wiry guy cast a glance at his partner, and Silas could see the internal debate playing out on their faces. They were cornered, and it was now or never. Silas knew he could force them out, but something compelled him to take a different route. He straightened up, choosing his words carefully. Both intruders blinked at him, uncomprehending. The woman asked, confusion replacing fear. "There's plenty of honest work to be done here," Silas offered, tilting his head toward the door that led outside. "You need food. Help me with my harvest instead." Silas could see the wheels turning in their minds. The wiry man glanced at the tools on the ground, then back at Silas. "You want us to work?" "Yeah," Silas replied, feeling a rush of hope. "You can help me pick the apples." The woman hesitated, then stepped forward. There was a hint of disbelief in her voice. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped," Silas said, looking them both in the eye. "And I believe in second chances." The tension in the barn shifted as shadows merged with the soft glow of lantern light. Silas stood firm, a pillar of strength amidst their uncertainty. "Look around," he continued. "This farm means everything to me, but you know what else does? People. And every challenge can transform into a chance." The wiry guy looked at the woman, and Silas could almost see the gears clicking into place behind her eyes. After a moment that felt like an eternity, they nodded slowly. "Okay," said the wiry man, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll help." "Deal," Silas smiled, the kind of smile that spread warmth through his chest. As they stepped out of the barn together, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. It wasn't every day you offered grace to intruders, but here he was, choosing to open a door instead of slamming it shut. The orchard stretched out before them, a sprawling expanse of trees laden with ripe apples. Silas explained the best techniques for picking, sharing tips and tricks he had learned over the years. Laughter mingled with the rustling of leaves as they worked side by side, the earlier tension melting into camaraderie. Under the moonlight, Silas could feel their walls coming down, each apple snagged in a basket working to dissolve the past. They shared stories of struggles and dreams, of hunger and hope. The wiry guy, named Jake, confessed he had once dreamed of being an artist but lost his way somewhere along life's path. The woman, who introduced herself as Mia, spoke of growing up in a tough neighborhood where stealing felt like the only option. "I never thought I'd be picking apples at a stranger's farm," Mia laughed lightly, glancing at Silas. "But it feels." They worked late into the night, the orchard echoing with the sound of their laughter and the gentle thud of apples landing in baskets. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the land, Silas knew something powerful had happened. A bond had formed, sealed in the shared effort of honest labor. When the last basket was filled, they settled on the porch of the farmhouse, weary but satisfied. Silas prepared a hearty breakfast, the aroma of sizzling bacon and fresh eggs filling the air. They dug in, silence falling over them as they savored the meal. "Thank you," Jake said, looking up from his plate, eyes sincere. Silas nodded, feeling a flicker of pride swell inside him. Every person deserves a second chance. As they finished their meal, Silas offered them a new opportunity. "You can stay and help me with the harvest. I'll teach you how to run a farm if you're interested." Mia and Jake exchanged glances, the weight of the world slowly lifting off their shoulders. Could they truly start anew? After a moment, they nodded. "We'll do it," Mia said, her voice stronger now. And just like that, the farm began to bloom with new life. The trio cultivated not just crops, but a friendship rooted in mutual respect and understanding. What had begun as a night of desperation transformed into days filled with laughter, learning, and hard work. As autumn settled over the land, the farm flourished like never before. Silas found joy in teaching the intricacies of farming, while Mia and Jake uncovered talents they never knew they had. They designed art for the barn and created a space that felt more like home than before. The past was not erased. Each person carried their own scars. But together, Silas, Mia, and Jake shaped a brighter future. They learned from one another, shared dreams, and forged bonds that held stronger than any chain of doubt or fear. Through that dark night of uncertainty, Silas had turned a moment of chaos into a journey of healing. It was a lesson carved deep into his heart. One person's willingness to reach out and offer compassion could change everything. And in the quiet moments when they all sat around the dinner table, sharing stories and dreams, Silas reflected on that fateful evening. The sound of laughter and the warmth that filled the farmhouse was all the proof he needed. Sometimes, the most profound connections are born from the unlikeliest of situations, and every challenge is simply an opportunity waiting to be embraced. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the fields of Green Valley Farm. Silas Wright stood on his porch, wiping his brow after a long day's work. He could hear the gentle hum of the countryside, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of corn stalks bending softly in the evening breeze. But there was something else in the air, a hint of tension that felt out of place. As the shadows grew longer, Silas's keen eyes noticed movement near the barn. At first, he dismissed it as the wind playing tricks, but then he squinted, seeing a figure slip through the back door quick, stealthy, and definitely not supposed to be there. His heart quickened. Intruders. Silas had heard stories of burglars prowling farms, stealing equipment and crops. With each passing second, his mind raced through options, but nothing could prepare him for the rush of adrenaline he felt. He was not about to let someone invade his space and steal what he had worked for. He had a plan, and it was time to execute it. He softly stepped off the porch, the grainy gravel crunching beneath his boots. The barn loomed before him like an ancient fortress, sturdy but vulnerable to those with bad intentions. Silas had spent years fortifying these walls, both physically and emotionally. Could he protect it once again? His heart pounded as he crept around the side of the barn, hearing muffled voices echoing through the wooden beams. Silas listened intently, trying to catch fragments of their conversation. Two voices, both anxious, murmuring about tools and quick grabs. They sounded young, perhaps desperate. Silas quickly assessed his surroundings. The barn was filled with tools, hay bales, and machinery, but he had something better: his experience. He remembered all those times he had outsmarted nature, whether it was a stubborn crop or an unrelenting storm. Now he needed to outsmart two intruders. He moved back toward the front, slipping around the edge, pausing to think. Should he confront them head-on? No, that would only escalate things. As a farmer, Silas had learned that patience and strategy could often yield better results than brute force. He needed to create a situation that would catch them off guard. Then an idea struck him, a bold plan that would turn the tables. He would set a trap of sorts. Silas turned back toward the entrance of his barn, heart racing as he put his thoughts into action. Moments later, he was rummaging in his tool shed, gathering a few supplies: a rope, some old rags, and even a couple of cans filled with stones. Once ready, He moved back close to the barn's entrance and waited. The minutes felt like hours as he listened to the intruders' hurried movements inside. Their voices rose and fell, uncertainty creeping into their words. Silas could imagine their nerves. They thought they were getting away with something, but they had no idea what lay in store for them. Finally, he heard footsteps approach. Two hooded figures came out into the twilight, their outlines stark against the dim light. Silas held his breath and readied himself. They stepped closer, and as they moved away from the door, he made his move. Silas's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. The intruders froze, their wide eyes reflecting shock. Just as they turned to bolt back into the barn, Silas lunged forward, tossing the cans he had loaded with rocks. They clattered loudly, creating a chaotic sound that echoed in the stillness of the night. He bellowed, waving the rope threateningly. They looked at each other, clearly caught off guard. Panic flickered in their eyes, and Silas seized the moment, stepping closer. He demanded. The authority in his voice held them still, confusion mixing with fear. They were cornered by a farmer who wasn't going to back down. The wiry boy with messy hair stammered, "We didn't mean any trouble. We were just what?" Silas interrupted, his voice low but filled with weight. The girl beside him shuffled her feet nervously, eyes darting around. We just needed tools." Silas's heart was heavy. He could see their desperation, but they needed to understand the gravity of their actions. For a fleeting moment, he considered the path that had led him here. Times had been tough for him 2 times when he felt like giving up, but letting them off the hook wouldn't teach them anything. "What's your plan?" he pressed, stepping even closer. The boy's expression shifted, realizing he was backed into a corner both literally and metaphorically. "No, sir." Silas interrupted again, flipping the script in his mind. He could see their resolve waning, their fear beginning to morph into regret. He had them where he wanted as long as he could keep them engaged long enough to give them a choice. "Tell me," he said, voice rigid yet softer. Silas met their gaze one by one, searching for understanding. He was acutely aware of their body language. Each apprehensive step, each hesitant glance told a story. They didn't look like hardened criminals. They looked scared, like lost souls searching for direction. The girl finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "We didn't have any other options." Silas recognized the desperation in her eyes. It was familiar. "I get that," he said slowly, his tone shifting as he communicated not just annoyance but also compassion. "But stealing, that's not the answer." He took a breath, eyes settling on the tools they had disrupted. "I'll make you a deal. You help me on the farm, and I'll show you how hard work can pay off." Both intruders exchanged glances, uncertainty written all over their faces. He could see the flicker of hope igniting in their eyes, but fear still clung to them like a haunting shadow. The boy asked, skepticism edging his voice. "Just like that," Silas replied with a firm nod. "I'll feed you, and in return you'll learn what it takes to run this place." The girl glanced at her partner, then back to Silas. "We could do that," she said cautiously. Silas smiled, sensing the shift. "All right then, let's start with a patch of my pumpkin field." Relief washed over their faces, and as they moved back toward the farmhouse, Silas felt another weight lift. There was a long road ahead, but he had turned a moment of fear into an opportunity for growth. As they began working the next day, Silas made sure to engage them both, showing them how to plant seeds, how to nurture the soil, how to respect the land that had taken care of him for so long. He shared stories of the struggles he had faced, the storms that had threatened his crops, and the joy of a good harvest that tasted sweeter after hard work. Each day brought laughter, sweat, and an unexpected bond forming between the 3 of them. Silas taught them to have pride in their work, to see each seed planted as an investment in their future. And with every row they worked, he noticed hope blooming among them like the crops in the fields. One evening, under the vast starlit sky, sitting on the porch after a long day, the girl named Lily turned to Silas. "You could have called the police on us." Silas leaned back, eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Sure, I could have, but I believe we all deserve another chance. Life throws us curveballs. Sometimes we hit the mark, sometimes we miss it." Lily nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "I never thought I'd be working on a farm." "That's the thing," Silas replied, his voice steady. They spent weeks getting to know each other, exchanging stories of their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. The wiry boy named Jake shared that he wanted to be an artist to capture the beauty of the world in his own way. It was a dream buried deep beneath layers of difficulty. Silas encouraged him, suggesting they combine his artistic flair with farm life. And so it began sketching barns and fields, painting sunrises over crops. Jake's spirit lifted, rekindling a flame that had long been flickering. As harvest season approached, the farm flourished. Every hour of labor translated into a bounty of pumpkins and apples, vibrant and bursting with life. Silas had not just given them work, he had gifted them with purpose. One crisp morning, as they were gathering the last of the pumpkins, Silas caught Lily staring at the horizon. He asked, wiping his hands on his shirt. "I'm just thinking about how different things are now," she replied, a soft smile illuminating her face. "Remember when we first met?" Silas chuckled lightly. "Neither did I." They loaded the final pumpkins onto the truck, readying for market day. A sense of accomplishment buzzed in the air, and it felt like a victory shared among friends. Silas looked around at the hard work laid before them, a partnership forged in adversity. By the time they pulled into the local market, their truck was filled to capacity. A crowd had gathered, eager to see what the local farmers had brought. As they sold their goods, smiles spread across their faces. People in the community celebrated their hard effort, and Silas felt a swell of pride for what they had achieved together. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with soft pinks and oranges, Jake turned to Silas, a newfound sense of belief shining in his eyes. "Thanks for trusting us, Silas." Silas placed a reassuring hand on Jake's shoulder. "You two have worked harder than I ever expected, but remember this, life will always throw challenges your way." That night, as they sat around the fire under a blanket of stars, Silas watched as the embers danced in the night sky, grateful for how far they had all come. What began as a moment of fear transformed into something beautiful: kindness cultivated through hard work, love, and shared dreams. It was more than just a lesson learned. It was a new beginning. And in that shared silence, amidst the crackling fire and laughter, they found a friendship beyond anything Silas had ever expected. As the flames flickered and the stars sparkled overhead, Silas knew the real treasures lay not in the harvest, but in the lives they were building together. Together, they had grown from intruders and friends to a family bound by a shared journey. Life was unpredictable, but with the strength of unity, they could face anything that came their way. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting an orange glow over the fields of Willow Creek Farm. As the light began to fade into twilight, a sense of calm enveloped the land. Silas felt a familiar satisfaction after a long day's work, but beneath the peaceful exterior, something felt off. He sensed it in the stillness, an unsettling quiet that followed him as he put away his tools in the barn. He stepped into the barn, the scent of hay and wood mixing with the crisp evening air. His hand brushed against the tools, each one a testament to hard work and determination. But just as he turned to leave, he heard a noisy and unmistakable creak followed by a hushed voice. Silas's heart raced as he froze in place. Someone was in his barn. He leaned against the wooden wall, listening closely. Two figures shifted in the shadows, their whispered voices barely audible. Silas squinted, trying to catch a glimpse through the dim light. He could see the outlines of their dark clothing, the furtive movements as they rummaged through his precious belongings. Panic surged within him. "Not on my watch," Silas muttered under his breath, gripping a nearby pitchfork. It was time to act. He had always been a fighter, a man of the land who didn't shy away from trouble. Years spent weathering storms and battling pests had taught him resilience. But this was different. He knew he needed a plan, one that required more than just brute force. Silas remembered the stories his grandfather used to tell about tricking intruders, using clever tactics rather than direct confrontation. With a swift motion, he set the pitchfork down and opted for a different approach. He crept quietly to the side of the barn, glancing back at the two intruders as he moved. They were too focused on their search to notice him. Drawing in a deep breath, he rifled through the toolbox for something he could use. He came across an old layer of tar sticky, thick and plentiful. If he could use that to his advantage, perhaps he could outsmart them. Silas poured a small amount onto a rag, then quietly stepped toward the barn entrance, glancing back one more time to ensure he had a clear shot. One of the intruders whispered, panic edging their tone. With urgency stealing his nerves, Silas burst through the barn door, the old wood creaking loudly against the frame. He shouted, his voice firm and full of authority. The intruders froze, eyes wide like deer caught in headlights. But just as quickly they turned to bolt, their intentions clear. They dashed toward the exit, but Silas had anticipated their reaction. He had smeared the rag with tar near the entrance, and as they leaped for freedom, their feet slipped. With a thud, one of them fell to the ground, hands grasping at the slippery floor. The other intruder stumbled, barely managing to regain footing with a wild expression of fear. Silas took a step closer, raising the pitchfork just high enough to make his point. He warned, voice steady. The intruder on the ground looked up, panic mixed with confusion. "We didn't mean any harm, we just needed tools," Silas said, his grip loosening on the pitchfork. He sensed something deeper in their words, a story he hadn't yet heard. "You realize stealing is not the way out, right?" The girl who'd managed to stay standing stepped forward, her demeanor shifting. "Please, we didn't want to hurt anyone," she pleaded. "It's been tough out there." She hesitated, casting her eyes downward. Silas interjected, lowering the pitchfork just a little but keeping it ready. He could see their desperation, their nervous energy unfolding like a map of hardship. He had faced his own struggles in life and knew all too well how easy it was to slip into the wrong choices. When the girl hesitated, Silas continued, his tone softening. "I was once in a tight spot, feeling like I had nowhere to turn." The wiry boy struggled to get up, wincing as he smoothed his clothes. "We thought it'd be easy. Just stuff a bag and leave," he admitted, casting a glance at his companion. Silas pressed, feeling the tension in the air shift. "Now we're stuck," she replied, bitterness creeping into her tone. Silas sensed a turn in the conversation. He knew this was a pivotal moment both for them and for himself. "What if instead of stealing you helped me out?" Both intruders looked at him with disbelief. The girl asked, her brow knitted in confusion. "Yes," Silas replied firmly. "I'll teach you what I know about this life. You'll earn money and learn the value of hard work." The wiry boy exchanged a glance with his partner, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Why would you do that?" Silas straightened himself, feeling the weight of his years hardening his resolve. "Because I believe people can change. Everyone deserves a chance to make things right. I could call the police, but we all have choices." The girl took a cautious step closer. "I do," Silas said, the conviction in his voice unwavering. The two looked at each other once more, and Silas held his breath. He could see their minds racing, the gears turning. Finally, the wiry boy exhaled, his expression softening. "Okay, we'll do it," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Great," Silas replied, relief flooding through him. "Let's start by picking up around the barn." As they began laboring in the barn, the atmosphere shifted. The air buzzed with new energy, each movement echoing the reality that they were no longer intruders but potential allies. Silas watched as they picked themselves up, dusted off their clothes, and got to work sorting tools and tidying up the hay bales. With every task, Silas shared the importance of each piece of equipment. "This pitchfork isn't just a tool, it's a symbol of hard work," he explained. The girl asked, genuinely curious. "It's in my blood," Silas replied, a hint of nostalgia shining through his voice. "My family has been farming this land for generations." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue through the barn, Silas felt hope blooming in the most unexpected of places. He had given these two a chance, and in return, they were beginning to discover the strength inside themselves. Days turned into weeks, and as the harvest approached, Silas saw a transformation take place not only in their work ethic but in their attitudes toward life. Their laughter filled the barn as they worked side by side. Jake, the wiry boy, discovered a knack for fixing machinery. Lily, the girl, showed a surprising talent for organizing the shed. They each grew more confident, smiling at their progress, as they learned to cultivate not just crops but also their own resilience. One afternoon, while breaking for lunch, Silas leaned back against the barn wall, enjoying the simple taste of fresh bread. He felt a warmth in his chest as he watched Jake sketching the pumpkin patch, the way the sun cast shadows across the vibrant orange fruit. "You've got real talent there," Silas observed. "Thanks," Jake replied, a shy grin spreading across his face. "I never thought I could express myself like this." "Keep drawing," Silas encouraged. As the harvest season intensified, they shared stories of triumphs and struggles. Silas opened up about the time a storm nearly destroyed his crops, how he fought through and rebuilt after the disaster. The more he revealed, the more Jake and Lily realized they weren't alone in their battles. But not every day was easy. One afternoon, after a grueling day in the fields, Lily felt the weight of her past creeping back in. She suddenly broke down, tears welling in her eyes. Silas knelt beside her, the warmth of his presence reassuring. "You are not defined by your past. Your actions from here on out are what matter." Lily took a shaky breath, nodding as Silas helped her back to her feet. Silas emphasized each word, his sincerity radiating. With time, Silas saw the darkness gradually lift from their eyes. Each day brought new challenges, yes, but there was an undeniable spark between them, an unique bond built from shared labor and hardships. As the harvest culminated into a bountiful success, they loaded pumpkins into trucks bound for the market, their hard work evident in every crate. Silas watched as customers marveled at the produce, the fruits of not just their labor but the triumph of newfound friendship. With every transaction, laughter erupted among them, a profound sense of joy echoing in the crisp autumn air. One night, as they celebrated around a fire pit, Jake turned to Silas, eyes shimmering in the firelight. "I appreciate what you've done for us," he said. Silas smiled, the warmth of community enveloping him. "I took a risk on you both because I saw potential." As laughter filled the air once more, the moment crystallized a beautiful reflection of what had unfolded since that fateful night. Intruders who had broken into a barn had transformed into trustworthy allies, friends with a shared story of redemption. In that glow of firelight, they found not only their purpose but hope, resilience, and community. Brought together by struggles, they forged a new path forward, one that promised brighter days ahead. Silas knew this chapter in their shared lives would not just enhance his farm, it had rekindled his own belief in humanity. Through compassion and understanding, he had not just changed the course of their paths, they had changed his too. As they sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing dreams of what the future could hold, Silas understood that sometimes life surprises you with the most remarkable transformations through fear, struggles, and the courage to extend a hand to change not just one life, but many. The sun began to set over the small farming community of Maple Grove, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. Silas Wright stood on his porch, tipping his hat as the warm light filled the peaceful surroundings. The scent of fresh hay hung in the air, mingling with the faint sound of crickets beginning their evening chorus. It was a perfect evening, one that promised warmth and contentment. But just as he relaxed, Silas heard a sound that shattered the calm. A loud clang erupted from the barn. Heart raced. The barn, a sturdy structure built from years of hard labor, had always felt like a sanctuary. What was happening inside? A knot tightened in his stomach. Trespassers. He pushed off the porch and made his way toward the barn, moving silently but swiftly. The crunch of gravel beneath his boots filled the air. As he neared the barn door, he paused to listen, adrenaline pumping through his veins. Voices. Low, hurried whispers floated through the air. Silas strained to hear snippets of conversation. It was a boy's voice, filled with urgency. This was more than a simple trespassing. There were intruders in his barn. Silas's mind raced. He had encountered challenges before: wild animals raiding his crops, unpredictable weather. But this felt different. His home, his hard work, was under threat. He couldn't let them take what belonged to him and his family. He glared at the barn door, adrenaline fueling his decision. Silas wasn't one to back down from a fight, but he knew that confronting them directly might only escalate the situation. He needed a plan, something clever that would catch them off guard. Quickly, he slipped around to the side of the barn, peeking through a gap in the wooden slats. He could see two figures inside, young, scruffy, and frantic. One was tall and wiry, the other shorter and stockier. They rummaged through his tools with a desperation that made Silas's heart ache. He took a deep breath and returned to the shed. Silas had spent years tinkering with tools, crafting equipment for the farm. Perhaps he could use that knowledge to create a diversion. He rummaged through crates, quickly gathering a few old marbles, a bucket, and some rope. With a plan in mind, he returned to the barn, heart pounding. He positioned the bucket at the barn door, set to tip over with a slight nudge. He scattered the marbles on the floor, knowing they would send intruders slipping and sliding. The ropes could help him trap them once they stumbled. Silas then stepped back, taking a moment to steady himself. He could hear the rustling of the intruders inside. This was not just about protecting his property, it was about teaching a lesson. "All right, take a deep breath," he murmured to himself. He took a few steps toward the door and kicked it open, letting it swing wide. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice booming like thunder echoing into the night. The intruders froze, their faces twisting in shock. The tall one shouted, but before they could make it through the door, their feet skidded on the marbles. With a crash, the shorter intruder fell to the ground, scrambling to regain his balance. The tall one stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding the wall. Silas seized the moment. He lunged forward, using the rope to expertly tie the young man's hands behind his back with quick, practiced efficiency. Silas growled, looking down at the fallen intruder with a mix of anger and empathy. The short intruder blinked up at Silas, fear mingling with the realization of their predicament. He gasped, trying to catch his breath. "Didn't mean any harm." Silas shot back, now combining frustration with determination. The tall one stammered. Silas leaned in closer. "Borrow." He paused, allowing their fear to sink in. He felt anger bubbling within him, but he remembered the stories his father had shared, tales of second chances and understanding. Intruders often came from desperate situations. He questioned, forcing them to think about their actions. The tall one glanced at his friend, then back at Silas. "It's tough out there," he admitted, his voice shaking. Silas studied them, taking in their ragged clothes and worn expressions. The quiet in the barn became thick with tension as Silas waited for their response. He remembered his own struggles, the long hours, the uncertainty that sometimes loomed over his farm. Life could be harsh, and he felt a flicker of compassion for these young men despite their misdeeds. He took a step back, relaxing his grip slightly. "Here's the deal," he said, his voice steady. "Instead of stealing, how about you work for your keep? I could use some extra hands on the farm." Both boys looked bewildered, the fear in their eyes slowly shifting to confusion. The shorter one asked, surprised. "Absolutely," Silas replied, crossing his arms. "You'll learn something valuable and you can leave the criminal life behind you." They exchanged glances, uncertainty lingering like a heavy fog. The tall one asked hesitantly. Silas chuckled lightly. "That's part of the learning process. Everyone makes mistakes." The boys shared another nervous look before the shorter one nodded. As they slowly rose to their feet, tension eased with every passing second. Silas felt the weight lifting from the moment of confrontation. Together, they stepped outside the barn into the fading sunlight, the air filled with possibility. Silas wasted no time. "Let's start with the pumpkin patch." They trudged through the field, Silas leading the way while explaining the importance of hard work. He showed them how to assess the pumpkins for ripeness, sharing stories of his own harvests over the years. "I didn't just wake up one day and know how to farm," he explained, gesturing to a large pumpkin vine overwhelmed with bright orange fruits. "This took time, years of toil." The boys listened, gradually shifting from anxiety to curiosity. Silas could see them opening up, the tension of the previous encounter melting under the sun. "Okay, this one is ready," Silas declared, demonstrating how to cut a pumpkin from the vine. The tall boy watched closely, mimicking Silas's movements. With every pumpkin they harvested, the sense of teamwork began to blossom. Laughter filled the air as they joked about each other's awkwardness, throwing in playful banter between lifting the heavy vegetables. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, Silas watched the transformation of the two young men. They went from intruders who had invaded his barn to hard-working individuals gaining confidence in their abilities. Jake, the tall one, showed a knack for fixing old machinery, while his partner, Lily, discovered she had a green thumb, tending to the garden with a delicate touch. Every day, Silas encouraged them not just to farm, but to dream. He often asked, "I always liked drawing," Jake confessed one evening as they rested on the porch after a long day. "I wrote stories and sketched the things around me." Silas urged, a light in his eyes, "Art has a way of healing." On the other hand, Lily found a love for the flowers they were growing, her joy spilling over as she nurtured them day by day. "I think I might want to start a flower business," she told Silas one afternoon. He encouraged, seeing her spirit igniting. The world needs beauty, and flowers hold a special place in that. As the harvest season turned to winter, Silas saw more than just pumpkins appearing. He saw hope and purpose take root in both of them. They had formed a bond stronger than he had expected, united by their shared struggles and the willingness to fight against the odds. One cold evening, as they huddled around a small fire outside the barn, Lily spoke up, her eyes sparkling under the stars. "I can't believe how far we've come." "Neither did I," Jake added, nodding. Silas smiled, warmth radiating from within. "That's the beauty of second chances." The months turned into a blur of hard work, laughter, and growth as they prepared for the upcoming spring. They planned to launch a small market booth, where Silas would sell fresh produce while Jake showcased his artwork and Lily displayed her flowers. One rainy afternoon, while they were cleaning tools in the barn, Jake suddenly stopped. "Silas," he called out, catching Silas's attention. "You've really changed our lives." Silas paused, looking at both of them. "I didn't just take a chance on you. I saw potential." Tears glistened in Lily's eyes. "You believed in us when no one else would." He felt his heart swell with pride. "This is just the beginning," he said. "You've built a foundation here that you can use in whatever you pursue." As spring finally arrived, full of new life, they set out to launch their stand at the market. The air buzzed with excitement, the warmth emphasizing the potential of their hard work. On that bright day, amidst bustling crowds and laughter, they set up their offerings. Silas's hearty vegetables caught the eyes of many, but it was Jake's artwork, beautiful depictions of their farm and the wonders around them, that drew in a crowd. Alongside them, Lily's vibrant flowers danced in the light, attracting attention from passers-by. With each sale, their confidence swelled. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with the colors of success, Silas stood back, taking it all in. This wasn't simply a market day. It was a celebration of life, resilience, and friendship. Later that evening, as they packed up their unsold goods, Jake turned to Silas. "Thanks for everything," he said genuinely. Silas smiled back, feeling a warm glow inside. "You both did the work." Under that fading sunset, they realized they had formed a bond that would last a lifetime, one built not only on their shared struggles but on trust and newfound dreams. They had gone from intruders in a barn to partners in hope. And as Silas stood among them, surrounded by laughter and stories, he knew this was the greatest harvest of all, a testament to resilience, compassion, and the power of choice. Together, they had shaped not just a farm, but a future filled with endless possibilities. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a twilight haze over the sprawling fields of Maplewood Farm. Silas Wright stood on his porch, wiping the sweat from his brow and reveling in the satisfaction that comes from a long day's work. The soft glow of dusk enveloped the land, and the calm rustle of the wind through the cornstalks played a peaceful melody. But just as he contemplated the day's successes, an unsettling noise shattered the tranquility, the unmistakable sound of metal clanging inside the barn. Silas's heart raced. The barn was his sanctuary, the place where he stored his tools and equipment, where every bit of labor bore fruit. He pushed off the porch and made his way to the barn, feet crunching on the gravel path, a knot tightening in his stomach. Just before he reached the door, he heard voices, loud, excited whispers. Something was terribly wrong. He pressed his ear against the wooden wall, straining to catch fragments of the conversation. "Hurry," a boy urged, his voice laced with urgency. A deep sense of dread settled in Silas's chest. Intruders had broken in, and they were rummaging through his hard-earned belongings. Silas took a step back, assessing the situation. Direct confrontation might escalate the tension, and chaos would only lead to disaster. He needed a plan, something clever to outsmart these thieves. He remembered the stories his father had told him about using the terrain to one's advantage. He slipped quietly around the barn, heart pounding, peering through a crack in the wooden door. Two figures were silhouetted against the dim light, a tall boy with a scruffy haircut and a smaller girl who seemed frightened yet determined. They were loading tools into a worn backpack, oblivious to the danger lurking just outside. Silas's mind raced. With their desperate actions, they felt like animals cornered for survival. He realized this wasn't just about protecting his property, it was a chance to teach them a lesson. But he needed to act fast. If they didn't leave soon, he might have to confront them directly and escalate the situation. He dashed back to his shed, grabbing a handful of rusty marbles that had rolled under the workbench last summer. A light bulb flickered in his head. He could set a trap, quick and clever, just as his father would have done. He also grabbed a bucket, planning to fill it with something heavy. With the faint sound of the intruders still echoing in his ears, Silas returned to the barn and made his move. He quietly positioned the marbles just inside the door and set the bucket on the top shelf, balancing it precariously. If he timed it just right, he could catch them off guard. Taking a deep breath, he swung the door open wide, his voice booming. "Hey!" The intruders froze, their eyes wide, caught in a moment of shock. The boy turned to bolt, but his feet slipped on the marbles. He fell back, startling the girl, who stumbled and knocked against the wall. The clattering of the bucket echoed through the barn as it tipped over, sending tools crashing to the floor. Silas shouted, his grip tightening around a shovel he had picked up earlier. Panic set in the eyes of the intruders. They had thought they could evade capture, and now they were trapped. "What do you want?" the girl yelled, voice trembling. Silas questioned, stepping closer, shovel raised. "You're stealing." Their fear was palpable, but deep down Silas sensed desperation mixed in the equation. He took a breath, lowering the shovel slightly, attempting to gauge their reaction. The boy shifted nervously, glancing at the girl. We thought we could borrow something." Silas paused, struggling. He understood that word all too well. He remembered days when the crops failed, when bills piled up, and when hope felt like a fading memory. There had been times when desperation tempted him to make poor choices too. Inkling of compassion washed over him, and he made a split-second decision. He proposed, aiming to plant a seed of possibility. They exchanged looks filled with uncertainty. The dynamic had shifted. The chance to turn their situation around was right there, but would they take it? Silas could see flickers of hope springing to life behind their frightened eyes. The girl echoed, skepticism lacing her voice. "Yeah," Silas replied. "I'll pay you a fair wage for the work, whether it's gathering tools, planting seeds, or helping with harvest." The boy studied Silas for a moment, clearly wrestling with doubt. He asked, brows knitted together. "Because everyone deserves a second chance," Silas said firmly, his voice steady. "I know how bad it gets." After moments of hesitation, the girl took a deep breath. "Okay," she said. Pride and relief coursed through Silas as he released his grip on the shovel. The barn, once filled with shadows of fear, was now filled with a cautious light. "Great," Silas said, the corner of his mouth lifting into a reluctant smile. As they began working together, the early tension slowly dissolved. Silas showed them the ropes, explaining the importance of each tool as they cleaned the barn. With every task they completed, it felt like they were starting to build something new: trust. The girl asked shyly as they sorted through the tools. Silas hesitated, pausing to collect his thoughts. "Because I remember being your age, feeling trapped with nowhere to go. I thought that just maybe I could change your path," he admitted, locking eyes with her. "I never thought I could learn to work like this," the boy Jake mused, glancing over at the neatly stacked tools. "It's never too late," Silas assured him. As the sun dipped farther down, casting shadows that danced across the barn, something miraculous began to blossom. Silas watched as Jake and Lily dropped their guards. They laughed over simple tasks, sharing stories about their lives, dreams, and failures. Slowly but surely, their connection deepened. Days turned into weeks, and with every sunrise, their bond grew stronger. Jake was a quick learner, developing a talent for fixing old machinery. Lily discovered an unexpected affinity for planting flowers and tending to the animals. As winter drew near, they transformed from frightened intruders into eager students. ready to learn from Silas and embrace their second chance. When they weren't working in the barn, Silas encouraged them to focus on their interests. He noticed how Jake would sketch the scenery. He encountered an old tractor here, a quaint barn there. "You should explore that talent," Silas said one afternoon. Jake seemed hesitant but intrigued. "Time invested in passion is never wasted," Silas replied. "Believe in your dreams." Lily, too, found her rhythm. As Silas taught her about the floral arrangements she could offer, her face would light up with excitement. She suggested one day, bubbling over with ideas. "Absolutely," Silas encouraged her enthusiasm. "That's a wonderful plan." As they prepared for the spring harvest, Silas felt a sense of pride swelling within him. He had turned their lives around with patience, guidance, and a little understanding. But the world outside the farm was still harsh and uncertain. That realization weighed heavily on Silas's heart. As he sat on the porch one evening looking out at the horizon, memories of his own struggles flooded back. He had worked tirelessly to build his farm, to create something that would endure. But could these two truly break free from their pasts? Just then, Jake approached him, a serious expression on his face. "Of course," Silas replied, sensing the gravity in the boy's voice. I've been thinking," Jake began, shoving his hands into his pockets awkwardly. "I know we've been working hard and I appreciate everything you've done for us, but what happens when we're ready to leave?" Silas paused, digesting the question. "What if we mess up again? What if we fall back into?" Jake said, pain etched on his face. A silence fell between them, thick with unspoken fears. Silas remembered the struggles he had faced over the years, the temptations, the moments he had felt like giving in. "It's not about perfection," he said steadily. "It's about choosing the right path every day." Just then, Lily joined them, her eyes bright with excitement. "You guys!" She jumped in place, the energy shifting the mood entirely. Jake asked, curiosity overriding his earlier distress. "What if we organize a small market at the farm? We can sell pumpkins, flowers, and Jake can showcase his artwork. It'll be like a festival." Silas smiled as her enthusiasm ignited hope in the air. "That's an outstanding idea, Lily. A way to introduce you both to the community." And so, under Silas's watchful eyes, they formed a plan. But just as they began setting up for their festival, shadows of uncertainty lingered. What if the past came back to haunt them? What if those who knew Jake and Lily saw their success and chose to remind them of their mistakes? As they cultivated flowers and arranged pumpkins for the festival, Silas couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of something precarious. Each moment they spent preparing felt like a precious gift, but it was also laced with tension. Would the community embrace them, or would they be reminded of who they used to be? Days flew by filled with excitement, and finally, the festival day arrived. People from Maplewood, young and old, gathered as the morning sun painted the world in golden hues. As Silas watched children laugh and play, he felt a thrill of pride swell in his chest. But just as the festival began to kick off, an ominous figure appeared at the edge of the property. A tall man with an intimidating presence, his expression dark and foreboding. Silas's heart sank as he recognized him as one of the town's troublemakers, and he turned to see Jake and Lily noticing the man too. Lily whispered, eyes wide with worry. "I'm not sure," Silas replied, anxiety clawing at him, "but I think I know who he is." As the man approached, Jake and Lily exchanged nervous glances, their excitement fading. Silas stepped in front of them, trying to shield them from whatever was about to unfold. But the figure's voice sliced through the festive atmosphere, demanding everyone's attention. He shouted, pointing at Jake and Lily, "What are you doing here?" The laughter faded, replaced by an uncomfortable tension that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Jake stiffened beside Silas, and the once excited festival attendees turned their attention to the unfolding drama. Silas's heart raced. He felt the weight of the moment pressing down. Time seemed to stand still as he stood between the intruder and the two young people he had risked everything to protect. Would they forge a new path, or would the past drag them back into darkness? Silas shouted, stepping forward, ready to shield his friends from the storm brewing. "They've worked hard to change." But the man just laughed, a harsh and ugly sound. "Change? They'll never change. They're the same lowlifes they've always been." Silas could see Jake's body language shift, shoulders tightening, the shadows of doubt creeping back in. Lily's expression mirrored his fear, and Silas felt an urgent need to protect them from this confrontation. "Look," Silas said, his voice steady yet fierce, "the past may have shaped them, but it doesn't define them." But as the tension mounted, Silas realized he couldn't protect them forever. Their journey depended on confronting their fears, on standing tall against the shadows that haunted them. Just when Silas thought the situation couldn't get more intense, he noticed movement from the gathered crowd. Faces once hopeful turned cautious, whispers buzzing like bees, uncertainty gnawing at the air. Would Jake and Lily rise to the challenge, or would fear pull them back into the dark? As the storm of conflict brewed, Silas felt the defining moment looming, a crossroads that could either shatter their newfound hope or forge it stronger than ever before. And as the festival's joy hung on the brink, only time would tell what lay ahead. Would they find the strength to defy their pasts, or would it swallow them whole? The weight of the moment pressed heavily around them, a turning point where courage would either shine or falter. What would happen in the next heartbeat? Only time held the answers as the tension thickened like a storm cloud ready to burst.